Fishing is a relaxing and fun pastime for many. I myself love fishing. I'm not very good at it, but I always enjoy my time with my family when I'm there. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, whether it's from a fishing trip, a camping trip, or something entirely different, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. Stories like yours that keep this channel going. Joining me today reading story number 2 is my good friend Mr. Davis. He runs a very interesting and very cool channel based around true crime and scary stories. If you enjoy his voice, I will link his channel in the description down below. Be sure to subscribe to him after this video if you enjoyed his voice. You won't regret it. Now, without further hesitation, let's get into these creepy and allegedly true fishing stories. I'm fishing down at Cadogan. It's on the Allegheny River in western Pennsylvania. So I parked at the top of the ramp going down to the river. Not a boat ramp, just one for backing four-wheel drives down to the water. I go up and it's getting to be just about twilight when I can hear something coming down the hillside across from us. It's steep, but not too steep. Anyway, I hear it barreling down the hillside, but the brush is thick and really high. The better part of 12 feet if I'd have to guess. Now, I'm waiting for a black bear to hop on the road, but it doesn't. It just stops in the middle of the last brush right beside the road. Thinking it was still a bear, I go ushering my friend and his 4-year-old daughter back down to the river. There's a bunch of rocks where they range from a basketball to a baseball size, so they can defend themselves. I'm still up at my car because I'm less than 5 feet from my door, and this brush is a good 30 foot away, so I know I can make it to my car and distract it with my horn and engine. And yet, it never leaves the brush. It just shakes it violently. I stand there for about 5 minutes. I can see it make its way up the hill. I didn't realize it was pushing the trees around as well. It has to be about 20 feet tall. I'm sure I wasn't connecting anything because of the adrenaline at the time. I never saw it. It was too dark at that point. I walk back down to the river and we're gathering up our stuff. It's getting way too creepy. We are packing up and I can hear a knocking coming from the hillside. I can see a group of people downriver from us, but they aren't near any trees. They're actually on the top of an outcrop and about 20 feet away from the tree line. This knocking is above us and slightly upriver, and even they had reacted to it. Looking around and whatnot, I yelled to them about possibly being a bear. They said they had heard something coming down the hillside and seen my buddy running towards the water. They thanked us for the heads up. As soon as they thanked us, a rock came flying off the hillside in between us and them. We actually saw the rock hit the water. They jumped as I did. We really weren't expecting it. I turned around to see if my friend was up on the hill and was just messing with us. As I turned, he was just a few feet behind me holding his daughter, and both were white as a ghost. None of us were expecting that. I decided to reach down and grab a rock and carried it with me just in case it got real. 3 more times we heard these rocks hitting the water, and I had just had enough. Our site was all cleanup, and I knew there weren't any trees around, and I figured if I threw it, it would probably just blow right through it. But it didn't. It made a sound like someone who was beating their chest, and it rolled back out towards me. I actually heard whatever I hit get the wind knocked out of it, and hit the hillside. And it hit the hillside. It takes off down the road towards the other group. They start screaming, and I mean screaming like they were in utter terror, and start throwing whatever they could grab at it. I'm just standing there bewildered and watching them scatter. Few went into the water and the rest ran towards me. All of a sudden, someone yells, "Get in the truck!" Now they took off to their truck, and I mean it when I said they left everything. Nobody grabbed anything and they took off in all directions. I'll never forget their screams. I ran back up the hill and hopped in my car. My buddy ran up with his daughter right after and they started shouting. He was crying, and I've known this man for 20 years, and I can count on one hand how many times I've seen him cry. I started up my car and we hightailed it out of there. I never saw what it was, but I put everything together that night. It's been around 5 years since it happened, and he absolutely refuses to go down there again, as to why, and I don't blame him. It's a damn shame too, because it's an amazing catfish spot. This is a real encounter. I can add more depth and character names to give it more, but it's considered a condensed summary what I shared here. Thanks for sharing my experience on the show.
Nobody has believed me when I tell them this story, but I swear to God it was true. I was in my front yard in Idaho one summer night, smoking a cigarette. There's a warehouse-style aluminum building that resales used construction materials and has an odd collection of all sorts of windows, bathtubs, barbecues, trusses, and other things in a yard out back. I heard some strange noises that sounded like something banging something against the building, or knocking really hard. The building is backed up to the bottom of a mountain. The mountain ranges go on for hundreds of miles to the east, with only a sparse town about 40 miles from my house. The rest is just desert, a giant expanse of empty desert. I've heard these noises a lot over by this building throughout the years. The noise almost has to be made by a human, but this scenario has always seemed unlikely to me, as there are no homeless people in my town and no one lives in that direction, as it's an industrial park. What the noise is something banging on the building or knocking on it in quick succession. There's no animal I know of that would be able to bang the building that hard, and no reason why they would at midnight to 1 a.m. Sometimes I'd get so frightened when I hear this noise and I just go back inside, but this night, for whatever reason, I had had it and wanted to know what it was, so I manned up and decided to investigate. I got over there and had that feeling I was being watched, but kept heading around to the back of the building to see if I could hear anything else. At this point, I got hit from behind by a spotlight and went, "Oh great, somebody reported me and now I'm going to have to explain myself to the police." I turned around, fully ready to tell the cop I had heard someone breaking into the building, but there was nothing there. No cop, no source of light. Nothing. I fully saw the spotlight hit me and saw my shadow on the building in front of me. I couldn't identify where it had come from, but at this point I had an awful feeling of dread and started back across the street to my house. As I was getting close to the street, I saw what looked like a small dog with really shaggy hair. The hair was so long it seemed to be covering its eyes. It was so late I figured it was lost, and I thought I could go over and check its tag to bring it home. The strange thing was, it was getting up and looking into the windows of an engineering firm. I'd never seen a dog get up on its hind legs and look into windows, but I figured it was hungry and looking for food or something. I came really close to it without making a sound, because I didn't want it to run off. I knew it must need help. Well, I got just a few feet from the dog before it heard me. It turned and looked at me, and I swear it had one big eye where its nose should be. I was shocked, to say the least. It almost looked like a totally white skunk with long shaggy hair, with one big eye right where its nose should be. It went running, but my hunter instinct kicked in, and I jumped in front of it and went to grab it. I know now this was foolish, but at the time I wanted to capture it, or else no one would believe me. It went running the other way, but I cut it off again. I went to grab it, but at this point it stood up on its hind legs and let out a sound like a cat hissing at me with a weird, almost human-like scream in its voice. At this point my rational mind kicked in and went, if this thing bites me or attacks me, who knows what might happen. I froze and watched it run off across the pavement and into the field, and it didn't make a noise as it ran. I stood there trying to understand what I had just seen, and to this day I still have no idea. Along with the spotlight that hit me from the same direction, and its strange behavior into the windows of that engineering firm, I'm still to this day utterly confused as to what the hell it was. I've never heard of another cryptid that matches this description.
Today I woke up in the morning, like really early, earlier than I ever really do. I put my clothes on and ate my breakfast. When I was done, I went outside and walked to my grandfather's house. It was a really warm day today, so we decided to go out and fish. We took all the fishing stuff to his car and drove to the lake where we were going to go fish. When we were there, we took out our stuff and started to fish. My grandfather caught one fish early on and was smiling, and I smiled back. I didn't get any fish at that spot, so I decided to move to another place a little bit further down the lake. It was near a little patch of forest. I began to fish there, and eventually I caught a fish, smiled to myself and threw the fish back in the water. I just fish to relax and don't take them home or cook them or anything like that. It's just more of like a catch and release kind of thing. When I did that, I heard some leaves rustling beside me, like if someone was walking in the leaves. I turned around and saw no one. I ignored it, thinking maybe it was just an animal or something. I started fishing again, and then suddenly I started hearing the same noise again. I turned around and once again there was no one there. As I was looking though, I still heard the leaves moving. There was no wind at all, and there were no animals moving. It was a really warm day, and it was very clear and nice. I got scared and just got out of there. I didn't say anything to my grandfather because I didn't want him to think I was crazy or anything. Does anybody here have any explanation? I've heard of things around my area that are called forest spirits. Maybe it was something like that sneaking up on me. If anybody has any answers, I'd love to see them down in the comments. Thanks for sharing my story. This incident happened in July of 2018. I was 15 at the time, and my two cousins, brother, and I were tubing with our parents. Our parents were fishing while we were going down the river. This story isn't particularly the most scary thing that has ever happened to me, but it was pretty weird and shocking to all of us at the time. For the first few hours of our day, nothing really seemed to catch us off guard. It wasn't until our last time tubing down the stream when we started to get a bad feeling about things. My cousin, we'll call her Charlie, saw a man near the shore where we would get off. For some context, this guy was around 5'7", and he was wearing overalls and work boots. When I first saw this guy, both Charlie and I saw many red flags. When we were about probably 10 feet away from passing the man, he turned and looked at us. He gave us the most weird-looking smile. I told Charlie to get up and start heading upstream, and we told our brothers to go with us. We were running up the river and carrying our heavy tubes, looking back at the old man, who was now inching closer and closer to us. As this fishing pole holding fool was just about to catch up to us, I saw my mother in the distance as we continued running up the stream. The moment that she saw this dumb guy running behind us, she said, "What the heck are you doing, running after my kids?" He stumbled back and started to stutter, but just after my mom scolded him, he just took off upstream and we never saw him again. Everyone who witnessed this experience happen all can agree that the man chasing us was clearly insane. The entire time he just had this sick-looking smile. Everyone, please remember to watch your surroundings. You never know how crazy such a normal person can be. Thank you for sharing my story. I know it was short and not as scary as some of the other ones on here, but it freaked me out at the time, and I think it's a good PSA. When I was 12 years old, I was down in my local lake with my family, fishing. It was a tranquil area with lots of geese, squirrels, and other common wildlife that I would play and interact with. There was a swing set in front of the fence separating the parking lot and lake area. I was swinging until I saw a dark greenish, blue pickup truck pull up in the parking lot. At first, when I saw it, I for some reason immediately felt uncomfortable. Like, really uncomfortable. To the point to where I felt nausea. This was probably the first time I can remember ever feeling this feeling. The truck had an old man in it, a shirtless old man. He was staring at me while I was on the swing. I stared back for a minute. This continued for a few minutes until I got off the swing and went down to the shore. My mom was sitting there, in her fishing chair, still waiting for a bite. I didn't mention Mr. Shirtless at first and just played it off. I kid you not even a few minutes later, this old man got out of his truck, still shirtless mind you, and walked down to the shore, only like 15 feet away from my mom and I. We whispered to each other, and I told her about what happened. This creepy guy just kept walking around our general area, eyeing us through the bushes. I honestly felt sick. This was just so creepy to me. I went to my stepfather and told him about my newfound stalker. My stepfather offered to drive me home, and I agreed, and that's where my part of the story ends. After dropping me off, my stepfather drove back to the lake to continue fishing with my mother. When he was driving back, my mom claimed that this absolute creep stared her dead in the eyes, nodded with a creepy smile, and disappeared slowly into the bushes, not going back to his truck. At some point, he was walking around in the water in front of her with that creepy smile, just staring at her. Apparently, after he went into the bushes, she never saw him come back out to his truck, and when they packed up to leave, it was getting dark, and they still never saw him leave the woods. Not sure how creepy this is, but to me, it freaked me out. Around 10 p.m. one night, I was at the river with my boyfriend, just hanging out with him while he fished. We were the only people left there that late. There was no noise other than the sound of the water. So when we started to hear voices coming from around a bend in the trail, we noticed right away. We both kind of stopped and looked towards the sound, but it was too dark and the trail curved, so we couldn't see anything. The voices slowly got louder, and we started to also hear the beating of what sounded like a drum. We were kind of trying to laugh it off, but we had stopped talking for the most part and kept watching the bend in the trail. We both knew that that was the only entrance and exit to the place we were at. The park closed at dark and we weren't actually supposed to be there, but this was kind of our spot, and we have never ever saw anyone here there that late. We start seeing the flickering of a fire, and a group of people come around the bend carrying what looked like to be torches. I'm starting to get seriously weirded out now. I'm pretty bad at judging distances, but the people were far enough away that we could just barely make out some of the words they were saying, and I felt like they had not noticed us quite yet. The words we could make out were creepy things like God, obey, master, and other religious type stuff. We started quietly discussing what this could be. Maybe it was some sort of religious cult or something, I don't know. What should we do? How do we get out of this situation? What happens if they catch us? If we moved to walk away from them, it might attract their attention, and we would only be walking further away from the exit. Was there any reason to do anything at all? It's not like we had any real reason to feel threatened, but we felt uneasy either way. Suddenly, they all turned and started moving towards us. As they got closer, I could hear the leader, or I guess who I thought was the leader, more clearly. He was leading a group of people who were all tied together at the waist and telling them if they were good and listened to the master, they wouldn't get whooped. It was a slave reenactment, apparently. We were in Richmond, Virginia, on which is clearly marked as a historic slave trail. They passed us by with no incident and we laughed at ourselves for being dumb. But honestly, that's not something you're expecting to see, and it creeped us out at the time. I was about 26 years old when this event happened, about 4 years ago. A friend and I decided to go on a 2-week road trip from Kansas through Colorado, Utah, and all the way down the West Coast. We camped the whole way and had an incredible time, other than occasionally having trouble finding campsites. One day, after a fun, gluttonous night in Portland, we decided to camp on Mount Hood. It was the middle of the summer, so we expected to see other campers on the mountain, even though it was a weekday. We had to drive pretty far up the mountain in search of a campsite, because all the ones towards the bottom were closed, due to fallen trees or trees that would be falling if a strong breeze came through. Not really sure what that was about, but it was a beautiful mountain with natural spring water and clear rivers. We were really excited to be there, to be one with nature, secluded. We saw a couple of old men fishing on the way up, and one family camping. They appeared to be Native American, and there were about 5 of them. I don't think these details really matter, just describing them as best as I can. We drive up quite a ways, before we find a nice private campsite and set up camp for the night. We walk around, gathering wood and talking about the night in Portland, and setting up the tent. The time comes for us to go to bed, and my friend, Lucy, falls asleep rather quickly. I'm still laying there struggling to fall asleep when I hear some footsteps out in the distance and leaves crunching. This puts me on high alert. Since there weren't many people camping and no one was close by us, I lay there with my heart racing and listening as intently as I can. I began to hear voices, and I try to nudge my friend awake, but she is pretty out and not really waking. I continue to listen, and I start to make out the voices and words. This is where it really creeps me out. It was our voices, having the exact conversation we were just having around the campfire, not even an hour ago. It didn't last long before the silence returned once more, but needless to say, I had a very hard time sleeping that night. Has anyone ever experienced anything similar to this? Am I just being crazy, or are there things out in the woods that can mimic our voices, or was it a ghost, or maybe a glitch in the Matrix? I don't know. So I personally didn't encounter or sight this creature, but it's a wicked legend, and I think there's some truth to it. So for some background, there is a local lake near my house, which is quite popular in the summertime. It has these awesome high rocks, and people love to jump off of them. There are great places to hike around it as well, and there is a beach that lots of people enjoy going to, including myself. This story begins in the summer of 1972. I'm not sure on the exact time, but somewhere in that range. 2 boys were swimming in the lake, late in the evening, when they noticed a creature surfacing. The report says that the 2 kids said it looked almost like a creature from the Black Lagoon. It had scaly skin, sharp claws, and what looked to be spikes on its head. Obviously, the kids ran away in fear, almost peeing themselves. Another recent story from this legend is that on August 2006, a man was fishing in the lake. When he finished with his catch, he heard rustling in the bushes behind him. He didn't want to see what it was, so he leapt in his car. Suddenly, he heard a loud thunk and noticed a humanoid creature on his roof. He sped off, causing the creature to fall off. When he got home, he saw scratches and fish scales on the roof. Personally, whenever I go out there, I get an eerie feeling like someone is watching me. I don't know why, but it's quite scary. If anybody has any idea what kind of cryptid or monster or type of folklore this creature could be, please comment down below letting me know. This honestly has interested me my entire life, and like I said, the feeling at this lake is just creepy. Before I begin this story, I would like to say I'm 17 years old and I'm probably one of the least intimidating people I know. This happened like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but honestly, it's summer and I can't keep a track of the days anymore. I live near this really busy road, and across from my house are these little parks where you can go fishing and this huge river where people drive boats and stuff. I have always loved to explore, and so walking along the river to look for cool stuff is something I really enjoy. I also tend to bring a fishing rod with me while I do this and fish. Anyways, I have gone to the river many times before, but this was the first time I had ever went alone. On that day, everything was pretty normal, and I was texting pictures of some cool trash and rusty things that had washed up close to me to a friend. It was fun until I happened to look up for some odd reason and noticed this dark-colored car with its window down on the gravel road. There was a guy driving it with a red shirt, a hat, and sunglasses. He was staring at me, so naturally I was like, what the heck? What's this dude's problem? I began to pick up my pace a bit, checking to see if he was following me. Sure enough, as I made my way down the river, he was. I panicked, frantically texting my friend about it and sent him my location in case something had happened. Can never be too safe in these situations. I was so freaked out that I didn't originally notice that the stranger was filming me on his phone. My friend called me and told me to try to get a hold of my parents because he couldn't do anything to help me at the moment. He was on the other side of town and was currently at work. I called my dad and stayed on the line until he could come take me home. This part was kind of a blur because I was so terrified, but from what I can remember, the stranger left at some point, probably because I was calling someone or something. And my dad showed up pretty quickly, honestly. He's the real MVP of this whole story. The whole experience was freaky, and I'm never going to that river alone again. Hopefully that guy will stay out of my life from now on. But on the bright side, I did catch a pretty gnarly bass. Thanks for listening to these creepy and allegedly true fishing stories. Now, these were some pretty creepy experiences, and I hope I never have any of these kind of experiences while I am fishing in the future. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, whether it be a fishing story, a camping story, or anything of the likes, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this channel going. If you enjoyed my friend, Mr. Davis's voice, be sure to check out his channel. I have it linked down below in the description. He does a lot of very interesting videos on true crime and scary stories. Definitely give him some love if you enjoy his voice. If you like these stories, please hit that like button, as it helps me out a ton. The more people that like this, the more YouTube promotes it to fresh new eyes. If you're new to the swamp, want to subscribe, turn on notifications, and never miss a new video. I upload them almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. If you guys aren't aware, you can download your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and pretty much every other major podcasting platform that you can find. It's always nice to be able to bring your stories wherever you are. We have raised well over $1,000 so far for the Rainforest Fund. This fund is to help protect and preserve the forest, as well as aiding to the current fires ravaging the forest. If you guys would like to support that, you can do so by donating with the link that you can find on the side or under the video. It would be very much appreciated, and I can't believe how much we've already raised so far. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting the swamp. You guys are the greatest community in the horror field, and I do wholeheartedly believe that. As always, I'll see you soon with another creepy video. And if you made it all the way to the end, be sure to comment "Fishing Minnows" if you made it, just to confuse everybody. I'll see you guys soon.